Dr. Abhishek Singhvi.
Mr. Chairman, sir, esteemed members of this august House, I have heard my friend Ravi ji with rapt attention, but I could only think,
I will hear you too.
hopefully without interruption, Ravi ji, I could only think that he is ultimately indulging in the classic art of opposition speak. He must criticize for the sake of criticism. He must criticize because he is in the opposition. I would venture to suggest respectfully that perhaps he even himself does not believe in most of the criticisms which he has made today. His opposition is of the kind कि कुछ तो लोग कहेंगे, लोगों का काम है कहना. And really, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee should have, in his opening, but perhaps he cannot say it as finance minister, but I can, on behalf of Pranabda, quote Adlai Stevenson, that if I offer my opponents a bargain, if they stop telling lies about me, I will stop telling the truth about them. Unfortunately, my friend Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad's entire speech is nothing but rhetoric, provocation, but unfortunately not backed by facts. Sir, I also would like to go back to July 2009 when I had the privilege to open the budget debate for the Treasury benches. And coincidentally, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad opened it for the opposition. And I had then started by saying, and I'd like to repeat now, that a budget can and does mean different things to different people. It means a different thing to the Aam Aadmi, it means a different thing to the corporate, it means a different thing to stock market bulls and bears. But ultimately, on an objective set of criteria, what should a relatively or a reasonably ideal budget be? And I had then itemized 3 criteria with which I'd like to start and on which I'd like to test Pranabda's 2011 budget. The first object of a budget necessarily has to be to reflect the philosophy, the vision, the thinking of the government of the day. The second has to deal with the macroeconomic essentials of the country. And the third is to initiate the process of translating that vision for the future onto a firm, prosperous foundation in terms of details. And over the next roughly 45 minutes, I will endeavor to prove that on each of these 3 criteria, this is an absolutely unexceptional budget, an excellent budget. And may I begin by trying to decode the genetic code of this budget by an acronym which I have formulated. The acronym I formulated is DIRECT, D-I-R-E-C-T, where DIRECT stands for disciplined, D for disciplined, I for inclusive, R for reform-oriented, E for a very unusual facet of this budget, a control or reduction in expenditure growth. So E for expenditure growth reduction, C for creative, and T for transformative. And may I try to follow these acronyms to the extent I can and show to you that this is not mere rhetoric, but is backed by concrete facts and figures in each para of the budget. Friends, let's start with the discipline, the D. There are various figures given in the budget at a glance booklet. And I think this budget has shown more than any other that good politics and good economics need not be divorced. Good politics can be good economics, and the vice versa is equally true. Indeed, the finance minister, with the discipline he has shown in the past and projected in the future, has already on most important parameters of the revised estimates outperformed his own budget estimates. And I'm starting with that. The budget estimates for 2010-11 stand outperformed by the revised estimates for 10-11. And if you will just notice, and I'll skip the absolute figures because I have the absolute figures, but they are a little boring and long. The revenue receipts have increased considerably from the budget estimates to the revised estimates for 10-11, from about 6.82 lakh crores to 7.83 lakh crores. But the revenue deficit has decreased in both absolute terms as well as in percentage terms. And if you take just the percentage terms, it has decreased from 4 to 3.4%. I'm talking of last year's budget estimates and this year's revised estimates, from 4 to 3.4%. The effective revenue budget has also similarly decreased in percentage terms from 3.5% to 2.3%. And that's a very significant figure. And the most important, the fiscal deficit has again decreased in percentage terms from 5.5 to 5.1%. So, friends, the Honorable Finance Minister has proved to be a very prudent and a successful housewife for the nation. He has confidently, because of that prudence and that discipline, been able to proclaim for the future a fiscal deficit, and now I go from the revised estimate to next year's budget estimates of 4.6% as against 5.1 in the revised estimate, and an effective revenue deficit from 2.3% to 1.8%. The Finance Minister has been straightforward. He has kept his promise that the frequently off-budget expenditures or items like oil, fertilizer, bonds would be counted and are being counted as part of the main deficit. No sleight of hand was practiced, and yet the deficits were significantly reined in and very promisingly projected for the future. He has bitten the bullet by recognizing the worst-kept secret of huge leakages in kerosene and fertilizers, with which we are all familiar, and has therefore made the significant announcement of direct transfer of cash subsidy to BPL families in a phased manner. We have, sir, successful counterparts of the cash subsidy model in several countries, in particular in Brazil, in Turkey, in Colombia, in Egypt. And the most successful, Brazil's so-called Bolsa Familia project, is supposed to have benefited about 45 million to 50 million persons. And some reports suggest that it was the single most important factor in reducing poverty levels as per their defined poverty line in Brazil from 22% in 2003 to 7% in 2009. Well, certainly this government may or may not be successful in reaching the Fiscal Management Act's targets in the time given. But I do not think anyone, except an opposition bent upon criticizing for the sake of criticism, can doubt his sincerity. He has not increased taxes. He has not made any drastic cutbacks. He has not cut expenditure. And he has still, in fact, increased social sector allocations handsomely. And yet he has come up with a disciplined deficit figure. And therefore, fiscal consolidation is the signature tune of the discipline, the first letter of my acronym D, with which this budget has a hallmark. Indeed, it is very interesting, and I would congratulate the Prime Minister or the Finance Minister on the fact that he has calibrated successfully calibrated the spending phase of this government, the 2008-2009 recessionary phase, and the more disciplined, less spending phase, which must now follow. He has waxed and waned like the tides, and successfully, because he rolled successfully, he rolled with and he rolled out of that recession of 08 and 09, and he has now done some very carefully targeted, controlled expenditure to rein in deficits. Sir, the second letter, if fiscal consolidation is the signature tune of this budget, then the second letter of my acronym DIRECT, I for inclusion, is the identity, not only of the budget, it is the identity of UPA 1 and of UPA 2. I can, sir, without hesitation say that no country in the world has even imagined, much less implemented, programs of social welfare, of inclusion, of the size and scale implemented actually successfully by UPA 1 and UPA 2. And one of the biggest ones in that is about to roll out the food security program. That trend of inclusion, that momentum, that direction, that speed continues. And sir, it defines, it delineates and describes the very heart and soul of UPA 1 and 2. We are, sir, at an inflection point on inclusion. There is a remarkable thing happening and not too noticed. Our social sector total allocations have reached just behind our defense budget. There's a small gap, 1,60,000 crores for social sector spending and 1,64,000 for defense. This, sir, is a revolutionary change in thinking. It is a revolution in mindset, and it is a gift of the UPA's philosophy, of the UPA's approach. Today, inclusion is a buzzword, but it has become a buzzword because of the UPA, because of our successive budgets. As an editorial in a leading newspaper 2 days ago put it, and I quote, it said, even BJP-ruled states trumpet how much better than Congress-ruled states they are at creating and implementing welfare programs which we have created. It is our philosophy, sir, to give ownership of resources, of programs, to give direct connectivity with individuals, cutting across government as far as possible. And the zeal for inclusion of such welfare programs, the zeal for inclusion generally, is clear from a whole section, section 3 devoted in the budget, over 5 pages, 15 to 20 of the budget, only to inclusion.
Yes.
Sir, you know about...
Mr. Singhvi, you can continue your speech when when the discussion resumes again. 1 hour lunch break. House adjourned to meet at 2 p.m.
2 p.m. Right.